They said I'd given up on love. The whole town said it. The women at church said it behind their fans. The men at the feed store said it while they waited for their sacks of grain. Even my own hired hand said it, right to my face, one cold morning while we mended fence. "You're gonna die alone out here, Caleb," he said, "and you don't even seem to mind." I didn't answer him. I just kept twisting wire around that post, like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. But here's the thing nobody knew. Here's the thing I buried so deep, even I tried to forget it some nights. I hadn't given up on love at all. I was drowning in it every single day. Stay with me here, because this story isn't the one you think it is. And by the end, I think you'll understand why I never said a word. Her name was Abigail Reed. She came to our little town on the Montana-Texas border to teach school, fresh off the train with a trunk full of books and a look in her eye like she'd already decided the whole world needed fixing. She was beautiful in a way that made men forget their manners. Soft brown hair, kind eyes, the kind of face that looked gentle even when she was angry, which, trust me, she got plenty angry at me. She noticed me the first week. Not because I was charming, I wasn't. I barely spoke 10 words to her the whole first month. She noticed me because every single evening right after supper, I disappeared. Nobody knew where I went. I'd saddle my horse, ride out toward the north pasture, and not come back until well past dark, rain or shine, every single night. The town had theories. Some said I had a woman hidden away somewhere. Some said I was hiding whiskey. One old rancher even swore I was talking to ghosts out there. Abigail didn't believe any of it. She just watched and waited and asked questions nobody else dared to ask. Have you ever met someone who refuses to accept the story everyone else already believes about you? That was Abigail, and it terrified me. "Why won't you court anyone, Caleb?" she asked me straight out, one Sunday after church, in front of half the congregation. I remember the silence that followed. I remember how my collar suddenly felt too tight. "Not every man's built for it," I told her, and I walked away before she could push further. But Abigail wasn't the kind of woman who let a closed door stay closed. She started showing up places. The general store, the church social, even the schoolhouse fence line, right when I'd be riding past with supplies. She wasn't chasing me for romance, not at first. She told me later it was something simpler than that. She said I looked like a man carrying something too heavy to carry alone, and she couldn't walk past a person in pain without wanting to understand why. Isn't that a strange kind of love? The kind that starts with curiosity about someone's wounds? I want you to sit with that question for a second, because I think about it still. She started asking around town. Nobody had answers. My own mother had passed years before. My father didn't talk much before he died either. There was no one left to explain the silence that hung over our ranch like fog that never lifted. She even asked my hired hand, a quiet man named Otis, who'd worked our land for a decade. He just shook his head and looked away, the way men in this country do when a subject's too heavy to touch. "Some things a man's gotta carry on his own, Miss Reed," he told her. "Best not to go digging." But telling Abigail not to dig was like telling the rain not to fall. She'd grown up the daughter of a preacher, and she used to say her father taught her one lesson above all others, that silence is usually where the truth hides, not where it disappears. So Abigail decided she'd find the answer herself. Have you ever known someone who simply refused to let a mystery stay a mystery, even when everyone around them said to leave it alone? Sometimes that kind of person changes your whole life. I didn't know it yet, but Abigail was about to change mine. One evening, she didn't wait at home like a proper schoolteacher was supposed to. She followed me. I didn't hear her horse behind mine, not at first. The wind was loud that night, and my mind was somewhere else entirely, like it always was on that ride. When I reached the old cottonwood tree at the edge of the north pasture, I dismounted the way I always did. I walked the same 15 steps I always walked, and I knelt down the way I always knelt. That's when I heard her gasp behind me. I turned, and there she was, still on her horse, hand over her mouth, staring at the small wooden cross in front of me. And beside it, A second, smaller cross, barely 2 feet tall. "Caleb," she whispered, "who is this?" I didn't answer for a long moment. The wind kept blowing. My knees were cold against the dirt. "My wife," I finally said, "and our daughter." Abigail didn't move. She didn't say a word. She just got off her horse, slow and careful, like she was afraid the ground itself might break. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the cottonwood branches above us, and somewhere far off, a coyote calling to the rising moon. I sat down on the cold ground, right where I always sat, and I did something I hadn't done in front of another living soul in 3 years. I started talking. Not to her. To them. "Evening," I said softly, brushing a bit of dust off the smaller cross. "Brought someone new tonight. Her name's Abigail. She's the schoolteacher. Kind of stubborn if you want to know the truth." I heard Abigail let out a small, startled laugh behind me, half surprise, half something softer. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there in the tall grass, letting me finish. "Isn't it strange, the things we do to keep the people we've lost close to us? A word here, a whispered sentence there. It doesn't bring them back, but it keeps a thread connected, thin as it may be. And some nights, that thread is the only thing holding a man together. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If this story is already pulling at something in your chest, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, the truth I'm about to share hasn't even started yet, and you're going to want to be here for the ending. 3 years before Abigail ever stepped foot in our town, I was a different man. I was engaged to a woman named Mary Ellen. We grew up together, 2 ranch families sharing one fence line our whole lives. Everyone always said we'd marry, and one spring we did. She was carrying our first child within the year. I remember how happy I was, how I used to talk to her belly at night, like the baby could already hear me. But childbirth in this country, in that time, wasn't gentle. It didn't care how much a man loved his wife. We lost the baby girl first. Then, 3 days later, we lost Mary Ellen too. I buried them both under that cottonwood tree because it was the only shade on the whole ranch, and I couldn't stand the thought of her lying somewhere without shelter from the sun. Do you understand now why I rode out there every single night? It wasn't whiskey. It wasn't another woman. It was the only place in the world where I still felt like a husband. Like a father, even if just for an hour, in the dark, talking to 2 graves like they could still hear me. How do you explain that kind of grief to a town full of people who just want a simple answer? How do you tell people, I haven't given up on love, I'm still living inside it every single night, without sounding like a man who's lost his mind? So I stopped trying to explain. I let them believe whatever was easiest. It hurt less than the truth. I expected her to pity me. I expected her to back away slowly, the way people do when grief makes them uncomfortable. She didn't. She knelt down right beside me in the dirt in her good Sunday dress, and she stayed there in silence for a long, long while. Finally, she spoke, soft as the evening wind. "You didn't give up on love, Caleb. You've just been protecting it the only way you know how." I broke. Right there. Years of holding it together, and I broke in front of a woman I barely knew. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just sat with me until the stars came out, and then she rode home beside me in silence, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Have you ever had someone see the real reason behind your walls, and instead of running, they simply sit down next to you? That's not romance. That's something rarer. Word got around, the way it always does in small towns. Abigail never told a soul. But someone saw us that night, riding back together in the dark, and by Sunday, the whole church was whispering something entirely different than before. Some said I'd finally moved on. Some said the schoolteacher had tamed the widower. None of it was quite right, but for the first time, I didn't feel the need to correct them, because something had shifted in me, quietly, like a door that had been rusted shut for years, finally creaking open just a little. Abigail kept coming around. not to replace what I'd lost. She was wise enough to know grief doesn't work that way. She just kept showing up, kept sitting beside me under that cottonwood tree some evenings, kept letting me talk about Mary Ellen and our daughter without flinching. She taught me something I didn't know I still needed to learn. That love doesn't ask you to forget. It only asks you to keep room in your heart for more than one kind of love at a time. I remember one particular evening, maybe 4 months after she first learned the truth, when Abigail brought a small bouquet of wildflowers with her to the north pasture. She didn't hand them to me. She walked past me entirely and laid them gently at the base of the smaller cross. "Every little girl deserves flowers," she said simply, kneeling in the dirt without a single concern for her good dress. I couldn't speak for a while after that. Some kindnesses are too large for words, and that was one of them. She started doing it every few weeks after that. Wildflowers in spring, dried lavender in winter, whatever she could find. She never asked for thanks, and she never made it about herself. She simply understood, in a way most people never could, that grief needs tending the same way a garden does. You can't just leave it be and expect it to heal on its own. Someone has to show up. Someone has to kneel in the dirt beside you, again and again, until the weight becomes bearable. I want to ask you something, and I really mean it. Have you ever misjudged someone because you didn't know what they were carrying? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise you, your story matters just as much as mine. It took nearly a year before I asked Abigail to walk with me to the north pasture on purpose, together, in daylight this time. We stood at the 2 small crosses, and for the first time I introduced her properly. "Mary Ellen," I said quietly, feeling foolish and sincere all at once. "This is Abigail. I think you'd have liked her." Abigail cried. I did too, though I'll deny it if you ask my hired hands. Then she took my hand, right there among the graves, and she said something I'll carry with me until my own name is carved into stone somewhere. "I'm not here to take her place. I'm here to help you carry what's left of your heart so it doesn't have to be so heavy anymore." Isn't that the kind of love this whole world could use a little more of? Not the kind that erases what came before, but the kind that simply helps you carry it. They still don't fully understand, even now, all these years later. They think I was a broken man who finally healed. They think Abigail fixed something in me that was shattered beyond repair. But that was never the truth, and I think it's time the truth finally gets told. I never stopped loving, not for one single day. I loved so hard, so deep, that it terrified everyone around me. My love didn't look like courting or dancing or Sunday visits. My love looked like 15 steps through tall grass every single night, rain or shine, for 3 long years. Grief and love aren't opposites. Nobody tells you that when you're young. They live in the very same room of your heart, and sometimes the deepest love you'll ever carry is the kind that never gets to be seen by anyone else. Have you ever loved someone so quietly that the world mistook your devotion for defeat? That was me. For 3 long years. That was me. Abigail and I married 2 years after that night she followed me into the north pasture. We didn't marry at the church, though the whole town expected us to. We married right there, under that old cottonwood tree, with Mary Ellen and our first daughter resting just a few feet away. Word got back to town about where the ceremony would be held, and for a few days the whispers started up again, sharper than before. Some folks said it was disrespectful. Some said a wedding shouldn't share ground with a grave. The preacher himself rode out to speak with us about it, hat in hand, clearly uncomfortable with the whole idea. "Caleb," he said, "are you certain this is the right place? Folks are talking." I looked at Abigail before I answered, and she gave me the smallest nod, the kind that told me she'd already made peace with whatever the town had to say. "Reverend," I told him, "folks have been talking about me for 3 years now. I reckon they'll keep right on talking whether we marry at your church or under that old tree. But this is the only ground that ever felt like home to me, and it's the only ground that felt right to Abigail too." He didn't argue after that. Some things, once a person truly understands them, don't need arguing at all. He married us right there 2 weeks later, under branches heavy with new spring leaves, with Otis and half the town standing quietly in the tall grass. and two small crosses resting just behind us like silent witnesses. Some folks cried that day. Not just Abigail, not just me. I think, in some strange way, the whole town finally understood what they'd misjudged for 3 long years, and grief has a way of humbling even the harshest gossip. Some folks thought it was strange, morbid even, but Abigail understood exactly why it had to be there. "Your family should be part of this too," she told me the morning of our wedding. All of them. That's the kind of woman she turned out to be. Not a replacement, not a rescue. Just a partner, brave enough to build a new love in the very same soil where an old one still rested. We had 3 children after that, and every single one of them knows the story of the 2 crosses under the cottonwood tree. Abigail made sure of it. She never let their memory fade, not even a little. Every year, on the anniversary of that first loss, Abigail would gather our children, still small back then, and walk them out to the north pasture herself. She'd tell them about their sister, the one they never got to meet, and about the woman who came before her, whose love had helped shape the very father they knew. Our eldest daughter, Grace, once asked her, "Doesn't it make you sad, Mama, talking about her all the time?" Abigail knelt down to Grace's height and answered in a way I've never forgotten. "Sadness and love aren't enemies, sweetheart. Sometimes the saddest stories are the ones most worth telling because they remind us how deeply people are capable of loving one another." I stood a little ways off that day, watching my wife teach our daughter something about grief and love that most grown men and women never fully learn in an entire lifetime. And I thanked whatever stars had guided her horse behind mine that first night in the north pasture. I think about this often, especially now, with grey in my beard and grandchildren running across this same land. The town had a story about me. It was simple. It was easy to believe. That poor rancher gave up on love. But the real story was so much bigger than anything they could have guessed. And it took one woman brave enough to ask the questions nobody else wanted to ask to finally bring it into the light. So let me ask you this, before we close out tonight. How many people around you right now are carrying a truth nobody's brave enough to ask about? How many of them are quietly grieving something while the world writes a simpler, easier story about who they are? Maybe that person is a co-worker who seems distant. Maybe it's a neighbor everyone's given up on. Maybe, just maybe, it's someone in your very own family. I'll tell you what I know for certain. The truth is almost always kinder and almost always more beautiful than whatever story people settle for instead. I think of Otis sometimes too, my old hired hand, the one who told Abigail not to go digging. Years later, after everything had come to light, he came up to me while we were mending fence, same as always, and he apologized. "Didn't mean to keep you locked up in that silence longer than you needed to be, Caleb," he said. "Just didn't know how else to protect you." I told him there was nothing to forgive. Sometimes the people who love us protect us the only way they know how, even if it isn't always the way we need. Otis thought silence was kindness. Abigail knew better. She understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a grieving man is to gently, patiently refuse to let him carry it entirely alone. Both of them loved me. They just loved me in different languages. Abigail passed 11 years ago now. She's buried right there too, beside Mary Ellen, beside our little girl, under that same cottonwood tree that's grown twice as tall since those early years. I still ride out there most evenings. Slower now, my knees aren't what they used to be, but I still walk those same 15 steps. Except now, I'm not talking to 2 graves, I'm talking to 3. And some evenings, when the wind moves just right through the branches above me, I swear I can hear all 3 of them telling me the very same thing. That love was never something I gave up. It was something I simply learned to carry differently. If this story touched something in you tonight, I hope you'll stay a little longer with us. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Quiet stories about love, about loss, and about the truths we carry that the world never gets to see. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. And until then, take care of the people around you. You never really know what they're carrying under their own cottonwood tree.